Hey guys, tonight we're tugging aside the velvet curtains, stepping softly into a place where you weren't supposed to be, yet everyone wanted to go. The speakeasy. The very word feels like a whispered invitation, doesn't it? Hidden behind barbershops, laundromats, and sometimes plain brick walls, these dimly lit havens pulsed with the heartbeat of the jazz age. You picture yourself slipping into one now. The outside is utterly ordinary, the kind of street you'd hurry down without glancing twice. But then you find the door, and you're suddenly brushing past plush curtains into a secret world that smells like spilled gin and perfumed hair. The moment you enter, you realize you probably won't survive this place if you're caught. But hey, history has always been a little reckless. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what's your location and your local time right now? I love imagining all of us scattered across the globe, tuning into the same sleepy story together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The curtains sweep across your back and immediately you're drenched in sound. Trumpets chatter, cymbals hiss, and a piano's keys ripple like laughter in a hot bath. The crowd hums with overlapping voices, so many secrets weaving in and out, as though gossip itself were a fourth instrument in the band. A man in a sharp suit tips his hat toward a woman in a beaded dress. She pretends not to notice, then shoots him a glance that could cut glass. You catch it, though. You always catch those fleeting sparks. Everywhere you look, there's motion. Cigarette girls slide through the crowd, trays balanced like halos of temptation. Waiters in starched shirts carry contraband cocktails, bathtub gin disguised with orange juice, rum hidden in coffee mugs, champagne fizzing in tall glasses that clink just a little too loudly. The irony is delicious. Prohibition was meant to tame society, but here it is, wilder than ever. Mainstream fact: between 1920 and 1933, the US government outlawed the sale of alcohol, thinking it would create a healthier, more moral nation. Spoiler alert, it did not. Somewhere near the corner, a couple leans closer, whispering in tones that sound casual but carry a different weight. You watch their shoulders angle together, their knees brushing beneath the tiny table. They're not just sharing drinks, that they're sharing danger, and isn't that half the fun? That's the quirky tidbit of the night. Falling in love in a speakeasy wasn't just about the person, it was about the thrill, like ordering extra spicy curry when you can barely handle mild. You're not there for the flavor, you're there to sweat. A band leader in suspenders counts off, and suddenly the whole room shifts. Dancers explode onto the floor, sequined dresses spinning like disco balls before disco was a thing, feet slap against wood, heels clicking like castanets. Every movement says something unspoken. That guy in the pinstripe suit, he's trying to show he's the best catch. That girl twirling twice as fast as anyone else, she's daring you to chase her. In a world where love letters could be intercepted and reputations destroyed, the dance floor became the loudest diary you could ever write. But here's a scholarly debate that will keep you awake longer than the gin fizz in your hand. Historians still argue whether speakeasies were actually progressive spaces for romance or just temporary playgrounds for rule-breaking. Some insist that yes, speakeasies gave women more independence, more freedom to flirt openly. Others say it was just a masquerade, that the power structures of society snapped right back into place once the music stopped. You'll probably keep turning that over in your head, the way a bartender keeps spinning a muddler in crushed mint. You notice something odd near the back. The curtains ripple though no one walks through. For a second, you imagine a ghost slipping in, some poor fellow from 1927, still chasing his lost love. And isn't that the truth of every bar story? Half of what's poured into glasses is alcohol. The other half is longing. The laughter swells, louder than the band. louder even than the whispers of the lovers tucked into corners. You feel the pulse of the room seeping into your chest, the velvet curtains at your back insulating you from the drab, silent world outside. Here, everything is sharper, clinks, glances, even the taste of orange peel floating on gin. You let your eyes close for a moment and the music doesn't stop. It curls around you like smoke. You could stay here forever, well until the raid comes anyway. But for now, this is enough. Velvet curtains drawn, your body sinking into the plush seat, heart thudding along with the trumpet's blare, secrets brushing against your ear like the hem of a sequined dress. The curtains close behind another patron, and you catch the faintest murmur, a code phrase tossed casually as though it were just small talk about the weather. "I heard the Yankees lost," one man mutters. "Terrible shame," the doorman replies, swinging the door open. The exchange is too smooth, too rehearsed. You realize the words themselves don't matter. They're keys slipped into invisible locks. Without them, the night doesn't begin. You linger near the entrance, watching this ritual repeat. A young woman in a cloche hat whispers, "I'm here to see Aunt Sally." The doorman raises an eyebrow, his hand brushing the brim of his own fedora. "Aunt Sally's expecting you," he says. And just like that, she vanishes behind velvet. To the untrained ear, it sounds like nonsense. To you, it's poetry, the secret verse of an underground world where romance thrives only if it can hide. Mainstream fact time. Speakeasies weren't just dim cellars or smoky basements. In New York alone, historians estimate there were more than 30,000 of them during Prohibition. That's one speakeasy for every excuse you've ever made to just stop by for one drink. Entire neighborhoods buzzed with invisible doors and knowing nods. Everyone seemed to know where to go, except, of course, the people paid to stop it. Or maybe they knew too, but looked the other way after slipping something green into their pocket. The coded phrases at the door weren't only about keeping cops out. They also became the first flirtation. You overhear one fellow quip to the doorman, "Tell her the moon's wearing a new dress tonight." The doorman smirks, steps aside, and the man struts in as though Cupid himself had signed off on his arrival. Romance began at the threshold, half performance, half gamble. But quirky tidbit, sometimes the codes were laughably absurd. One Chicago club required you to say, "Joe sent me." The problem? Everyone had a cousin, friend, or goldfish named Joe. Police eventually cracked down not by listening to the words, but by listening for the smirk in a person's voice. If you said "Joe sent me" without that insider sparkle, you were in trouble. The doormen themselves became unintentional matchmakers. They saw who arrived with whom, who left with whom, and who suddenly stopped arriving together. Imagine the gossip they carried like pocket flasks. A bartender might forget your name, but the man guarding the curtains remembered your entire romantic history. You press yourself deeper into the wall, trying to catch more of the exchanges. A man leans in, voice low. "I heard the roses bloomed early this spring." The doorman nods, his hand lingers on the knob, as though weighing the sentence's sincerity. Then the door creaks open. The man disappears, leaving only the echo of perfume and the faint scuff of leather shoes. Here's the scholarly debate that lingers like stale cigar smoke. Historians still argue whether these code rituals were strictly necessary or just part of the theatre. Some claim the passwords truly kept law enforcement at bay. Others insist they were mostly symbolic, an elaborate game of make-believe that heightened the thrill. After all, what's more romantic than pretending you're both characters in a spy novel? You imagine yourself standing at the threshold, palms damp. The doorman's gaze is steady, his arms folded like a fortress. You know the phrase, but what if you say it wrong? What if you stumble? It's like confessing love. You rehearse endlessly, but the moment of truth always comes out in a rush. The stakes are ridiculous and real at the same time. One wrong word and you're shut out not only from gin, but from the glittering chance of meeting someone who might change your night, your week, or maybe your life. Someone brushes past you, their perfume laced with gardenias, and whispers to the doorman, "The owl hoots at midnight." He grins, clearly entertained. "Then you better get inside before it flies away." She laughs, her laughter carrying just enough flirtation to suggest she wasn't only addressing him. You finally let yourself slip past, and the door sighs closed behind you. The coded whispers fade into memory, replaced by the roar of music and conversation. But you'll remember them, the strange passwords, the sly glances, the way love began with a phrase that meant nothing to anyone else but everything to the two of you in that moment. The first thing that hits you is the smell. Not the sharp bite of alcohol alone, though that's certainly there. Moonshine gin, raw and medicinal, stinging the inside of your nose before you've even touched a glass. No, what fills the speakeasy is a strange perfume of contradictions, smoke curling from long cigarette holders, citrus oils squeezed onto the rim of cocktails, and, weaving between it all, the musky sweetness of Chanel No. 5 dabbed on the wrists and throats of women who came here to be noticed. You take a breath, and for a dizzy moment you're drunk on nothing more than the air. The room is dim but not dark. Light bulbs dangle overhead, glowing through fringed lampshades, casting golden halos that never quite reach the corners. Lovers slip into those shadows, faces hidden, bodies leaning close. A man in a tuxedo murmurs something into a woman's ear, and she tilts her head back to laugh, though her eyes scan the room to be sure no one important sees. This is the paradox of speakeasy romance. Everything feels invisible, yet nothing goes unnoticed. Mainstream fact, tobacco smoke was practically another guest in every nightclub of the 1920s. Men puffed cigars, women proudly smoked cigarettes, a new symbol of liberation. Advertisers even marketed cigarettes directly to women under slogans like "Torches of Freedom." Imagine someone handing you a lit cigarette and telling you it's a feminist badge of honor. Odd logic, but it worked. A trumpet wails and the crowd roars as though the instrument itself just told a dirty joke. Couples press closer, some swaying, others sitting so tightly their knees knock beneath the table. You notice how quickly laughter turns into whispering. One minute they're shouting over the music, the next their lips are at each other's ears, their words hidden in curls of smoke. Here's a quirky tidbit. Chanel No. 5, the perfume most associated with this age, had only been released in 1921. It was groundbreaking because it didn't smell like flowers. It smelled abstract, powdery, daring. Coco Chanel herself said it should smell like a woman, not a rose, which is exactly what you sense here. No roses, no innocence, just human heat wrapped in mystery. Someone stubs out a cigarette, the embers glowing like a miniature sunset, and another match flares almost instantly. You half expect the air itself to ignite with so much smoke floating around. The jokes practically write themselves. If the booze doesn't kill you, the second-hand smoke might. But hey, at least you'll go out smelling like citrus and sin. You lean closer to catch the whispers, but they evaporate too quickly. A woman mutters, "Meet me after the last song." A man replies, "Slip out through the kitchen." Their voices are fragments, vanishing as soon as they're spoken. That's the thing about secrets in this world. They're designed to dissolve. Even if you catch one, you can't quite hold it. Historians still argue whether these smoky rooms encouraged genuine connection, or whether the haze was just an intoxicating disguise. Was it love that drew people together, or simply the illusion of intimacy created by dim lights and too much gin? Like a dream you swear felt real until you open your eyes, these romances might have been built from vapor. You glance toward a table where a man nervously lights cigarette after cigarette, offering them to a woman who accepts every one, her lips curving into a sly smile. Is she interested in him or just enjoying the free fire and the attention? You'll never know. That's part of the game. The smoke thickens until you can't tell where one body ends and another begins. For a moment, it feels as though you're drifting inside a perfume bottle. Every swirl of mist, another secret, another unspoken desire. You rub your eyes, but the haze doesn't clear. Maybe it isn't supposed to. And so you sit back, letting the perfume and smoke do their work. You breathe it in, tasting secrets on your tongue, watching stolen kisses vanish before you can even be sure they were real. The room hums with more than jazz. It hums with code. You tilt your head and realize that beneath the rattle of drums and clink of glasses, people are speaking in riddles. A man at the bar lifts his cocktail and says, "I'll have another South Side." The bartender nods, but you notice his eyes flick toward a woman seated 2 tables away. She looks up at the phrase, smiles faintly, then returns to her drink. The words weren't about the gin at all, they were a signal. Mainstream fact, Prohibition didn't just ban alcohol, it forced creativity in everything from cocktails to language. Menus often disguised drinks under innocent names. A horse's neck wasn't about stables, it was whiskey with ginger ale. A bee's knees was gin with honey and lemon. On paper, it all sounded tame. In practice, every order carried a wink. You noticed the rhythm, a request, a sideways glance, a small gesture. Couples carried on entire conversations without anyone else noticing. You sip your own drink, something with citrus that masks the sting of rough gin, and watch. A woman twirls the stem of her glass, her nail tapping 3 times against the rim. A man across the room mirrors the tap against his own glass. That's not random. That's a language. Quirky tidbit. Some speakeasies even printed joke cocktail codes for regulars. At one Chicago joint, ordering a corpse reviver at midnight was an invitation to dance, though depending on how much bathtub gin was involved, you might actually need reviving afterward. Imagine romance hinging on whether you accidentally ordered the wrong drink. It's like texting the wrong emoji, except instead of embarrassment, you might end up married. The smoke makes you squint, but you swear you see napkins changing hands. Not folded like trash, but carefully creased, passed from palm to palm. Words scribbled in pencil vanish into purses, and you realize you've just witnessed a love letter disguised as a table wipe. Romance here isn't grand. It's coded, tiny, hidden in plain sight. Here's a scholarly debate worth chewing on. Historians still argue whether these coded exchanges were necessary for secrecy or whether they were playful theatre. Were people really protecting themselves from prying eyes, or were they just enjoying the thrill of acting like spies in their own romance novel? No one can quite agree. And honestly, does it matter whether real or staged? The heart raced all the same. You can't help but grin when the band leader calls out, "This one's for the sweethearts in the room." A trumpet blares, the piano trills, and the dance floor fills. Couples sway close, whispering words that no one else will ever catch. You imagine one of them saying, "Meet me at the corner when the sax stops." Another murmurs, "The whiskey's sweeter in the kitchen." They're speaking English, but only to each other. It's almost comical, really. You lean back, sip your drink, and think about how today we send text messages stuffed with emojis and abbreviations. Back then, it was cocktails and coded phrases, 100 years apart, and love still requires translation. Your eyes drift to the shadows. The bartender polishes a glass, pretending not to notice the couple scribbling furiously on a napkin. He's the silent editor of their secret novel, letting the scene play without interruption. You smile. Romance survives not just because of those who risk it, but because of those who quietly allow it. The band swells and the coded whispers vanish into sound. For a moment, you almost forget they were there at all. Just another hidden language dissolving into the night. But you know better. Somewhere, behind the smoke and slang, lovers are writing chapters you'll never read. The music shifts, loosening its collar. The drummer leans into the cymbals, brushing them like a conspirator's whisper, while the upright bass thrums so deep it rattles the glasses on your table. Then the horns come alive, bright, sly, teasing notes that seem to curl around couples like invisible ribbons. You realize the real communication in this place isn't in the words at all. It's in the sway of bodies, the brush of fingers, the choreography of risk. Mainstream fact, jazz was considered scandalous by many Americans in the 1920s. Preachers denounced it as the devil's music, claiming it stirred sinful thoughts, which of course only made it more irresistible. You watch as couples cling closer, eyes half shut, as if daring the devil to make them dance faster. The floorboards creak under the Charleston, shoes tapping out rhythms like Morse code. A woman spins, her beaded dress flashing in arcs of silver and gold, her partner barely keeping pace. But you notice it's not about the dance itself, it's about the signals inside it. When she leans back a little too long, it's an invitation. When he spins her twice instead of once, it's a promise. They're writing letters with their feet, sealing them with sweat. Quirky tidbit. Some dance steps were literally named after animals, like the turkey trot and the camel walk. Imagine telling someone you fell in love mid-turkey trot. Not exactly poetic, but in the dim light of a speakeasy, a bird-inspired shuffle could spark something deeper than words ever could. Your eyes wander across the dance floor. In one corner, a shy young man clutches his glass, watching a bold woman twist and twirl. You see him finally gather the courage to step forward, bow slightly, and extend a hand. She laughs, tosses her bobbed hair, and drags him into the whirl. Within seconds, their movements sync as if they've rehearsed for months. That's the power of jazz. The music makes conspirators out of strangers. But here's the scholarly debate that jazz historians love to chew over. Was this music primarily an expression of rebellion, or was it simply a soundtrack for escapism? Some argue jazz embodied the chaos and freedom of modern love. Others say it was just background noise for people already drunk on gin and secrecy. Either way, your heart pounds with every trumpet note, and you know it mattered. The band leader winks, his bow tie crooked, his trumpet flashing in the light. He blows a playful riff, and suddenly half the floor is laughing mid-dance, as if the horn just cracked a joke. Couples lean even closer, clutching each other for balance, their faces so close their words dissolve into breath. You catch only fragments. After the last set, don't tell anyone. Tomorrow, same place. The music keeps building, until the floor feels like it might lift straight off the earth. You sway in your seat, caught between the rhythm and the romance unfolding all around you. Every dancer is a story, every dip and twirl a secret only they understand. And in that moment you realize something. In a world where speaking openly could ruin reputations, a dance became safer than words. You could confess with a twist of your wrist, a press of your palm, a glance over your shoulder. To everyone else, it was just music. To the two of you, it was a contract signed in sweat and saxophone notes. The song ends in a clash of cymbals, and the room erupts in applause. Lovers pause, cheeks flushed, eyes bright, pretending it was just a dance. But you saw it. You saw everything. The applause fades, and in the lull you hear it, the soft pop of a cork somewhere behind the bar. A thin stream of clear liquid glugs into mismatched glasses, followed by the fizz of something sweet trying to mask its bite. You lift your own glass and catch the unmistakable smell of rough gin. Not the crisp, expensive kind, but the kind that tastes like someone brewed it in a radiator, which frankly, they probably did. Mainstream fact. During Prohibition, much of the alcohol people drank was homemade bathtub gin. It wasn't literally made in bathtubs, though the name stuck because it was often mixed with water in large household containers. The taste was so harsh that bartenders drowned it with juices, honey, or soda. Ironically, this is how many classic cocktails were born, not out of creativity but desperation. You take a cautious sip. The citrus cuts through the sharpness, but there's no hiding the burn. Still, you understand why people kept drinking it. Alcohol wasn't just about fun, it was about loosening the knots tied tight by daylight society. And nothing unravels faster than tongues soaked in bathtub gin. A man in the corner leans a little too close to his companion. His words slur, but his intentions are clear. If the world ends tomorrow, I'd still meet you here. She laughs, rolling her eyes, but her fingers stay curled around his. Moonshine confessions. They arrive sloppy and sweet, half-truths tangled in alcohol's haze. You know some of these couples will regret their words by morning, but right now, under smoke and saxophone, every promise feels eternal. Quirky tidbit. Some desperate drinkers actually poisoned themselves with bad booze. Industrial alcohol was sometimes repurposed for consumption, and cases of blindness, or worse, weren't rare. Imagine trying to charm someone by raising a glass, knowing it might also raise your chances of losing your eyesight. It makes the phrase, "love is blind," hit differently, doesn't it? You overhear a woman at the next table giggle as her companion boasts, "I smuggled this bottle in from Canada." His chest puffs up like a peacock's, as if he personally outran border agents to deliver romance in liquid form. She gasps, whether at the story or at the way his hand slides over hers, you can't quite tell, maybe both. But here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether alcohol truly fueled deeper connection or whether it merely manufactured illusions of intimacy. Was gin a gateway to honesty or just a prop, an excuse for words too risky in sobriety? Some claim moonshine broke barriers, others that it built castles of sand destined to collapse with the sunrise. You swirl your glass and watch the liquid cling to the sides, like secrets refusing to spill. The taste lingers, sharp, medicinal, yet strangely comforting. Across the room, another toast rings out, followed by laughter loud enough to drown the band for a moment. Each glass lifted is more than a drink, it's a dare. To the law, to the night, to the fragile line between truth and fantasy. And as you sit back watching confessions spill as freely as the gin, you realize these aren't just romances, they're tightrope walks strung between intoxication and sincerity. One slip and everything falls, but for now, no one cares. The room is buzzing, the glasses keep clinking, and love, real or imagined, flows stronger than the liquor itself. The gin-soaked laughter fades into a deeper hum, the kind that tells you not everyone here is dancing for fun. You glance toward the far side of the room, where a heavy curtain drapes over a doorway marked only by a shadow. Patrons slip in and out, trying not to draw attention, but you can't unsee it once you've noticed. That's where the real secrets happen, not on the polished dance floor, not in the smoky lounge, but back there, behind crates stacked with bottles that technically shouldn't exist. You weave closer, heart picking up with every step, as though you're trespassing inside your own imagination. The curtain breathes with each entrance and exit, exhaling the faint scent of oak barrels and damp concrete. When you push past it, you're met with a different world entirely. The music muffles, the laughter fades, and the glow of lamps gives way to shadows sharp enough to slice. Mainstream fact. Many speakeasies had hidden back rooms, sometimes doubling as storage spaces for liquor, sometimes as private lounges for high-paying guests. These were the places where deals were struck, alliances were tested, and, yes, where romances unfolded away from prying eyes. You weren't just sneaking behind the curtain, you were stepping into the heart of the risk. A couple huddles in the corner, their words hushed but heated. You can't hear every syllable, but the cadence tells you everything. This isn't idle chatter, it's plotting. Maybe an escape, maybe a rendezvous, maybe both. Their faces glow faintly from a single lamp, perched precariously on a crate, their shadows stretching across the wall like silhouettes from a silent film. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some speakeasies literally hid lovers between cases of whiskey. A bartender might wink, motion to the storage racks, and suddenly two people were nestled between dusty bottles, sharing whispers sweeter than champagne. Imagine romance blooming in the same space where rats scurried and bottles leaked. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. You let your eyes wander further. Another pair leans close, their hands hidden beneath the table, fingers locked so tightly it looks like they're holding on to life itself. The room is quieter here, but the silence hums louder than the band outside. It's a strange paradox. You think you're invisible, but the secrecy itself makes every gesture feel louder. Historians still argue whether these backroom romances were genuine or opportunistic. Some say they were desperate attempts to carve intimacy from stolen hours. Others argue they were more transactional, tied to power, money, or the promise of protection. After all, in an era where mobsters controlled much of the liquor trade, love could be as dangerous as a double cross. You chuckle softly as you imagine explaining this to someone today. Where did you first kiss her? Oh, you know, wedged between a crate of Canadian Club and a sack of potatoes. Not exactly the stuff of fairy tales. Yet somehow the absurdity makes it sweeter. Love doesn't wait for perfect settings, it makes do with whatever space it can steal. The curtain stirs again, and another couple slips inside. Their eyes dart nervously, their laughter forced, but when they finally collapse into the shadows, their masks fall away. They speak in fragments, promises and apologies tangled together. You look away, giving them the privacy they think they have. In truth, every romance here is on borrowed time, borrowed from the law, from society, from the sunrise that will eventually scatter everyone back to their ordinary lives. And so you stand in the back room surrounded by crates and whispers, realizing that these romances are louder than the jazz outside. They're louder because they shouldn't exist at all, and yet they do, burning brighter for being hidden. You slip back toward the bar, and something peculiar catches your eye. The bartender isn't just mixing drinks, he's watching, always watching. His gaze sweeps the room with the precision of a lighthouse beam, steady and patient, circling again and again. Every time a couple leans a little too close, every time a hand lingers too long, you see his eyes flicker. He knows everything. Mainstream fact, bartenders in speakeasies weren't just pouring gin and cracking ice. They were silent guardians of the establishment. Many doubled as security, scouts, and even informants. They knew who was trustworthy, who had loose lips, and who might bring the law crashing through the doors. In a way, they became unofficial chaperones, deciding when to interrupt and when to let love slip quietly into the shadows. You watch one such moment unfold. A man in a rumpled suit leans too close to a woman whose pearls gleam faintly under the lamp. His words tumble out fast, reckless, like dice spilling across a table. The bartender notices her shifting uncomfortably, then clears his throat loud enough to slice through the noise. "Another round!" he calls, shattering the tension. The man jerks back, chastened, and the woman exhales in relief. Quirky tidbit. Some bartenders developed entire hand signals to discreetly intervene. A polished glass left upside down on the bar might be a warning. A slow shake of the cocktail tin could signal, ease up. Think of it as the original customer service system, except instead of preventing bad Yelp reviews, they were preventing heartbreak and scandal. You chuckle when you spot another scene. A young flapper flirts boldly with a man twice her age, twirling her cigarette between manicured fingers like a magician's wand. The bartender smirks, polishing his glass, and mutters under his breath, "She'll eat him alive." You can't help but laugh softly because, in this smoky theatre, the bartender is part audience, part director, part reluctant priest hearing confessions poured over ice. Historians still argue whether bartenders were protectors or opportunists. Some accounts paint them as loyal guardians who shielded their patrons' reputations. Others suggest they were pragmatic businessmen protecting the club's survival more than anyone's dignity. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between, the kind of grey space that history rarely resolves. You glance again at the man behind the bar. He knows every secret in this room, though he'll never write them down. He could ruin half the couples here with a single story, yet he chooses silence. Or maybe he doesn't choose, maybe he simply knows that secrets are the currency of the night, and his job is to keep the economy stable. A woman leans against the counter, sipping her cocktail with deliberate slowness. She doesn't notice the man staring at her from across the room, but the bartender does. He gives the man a subtle shake of the head as if to say, "Not tonight, pal." It's astonishing. You realize he's playing Cupid and Cerberus at the same time, guiding romance with one hand while guarding the gates with the other. You sit back, watching the bartender's quiet vigilance, and it occurs to you, in a world of secrets, sometimes the truest love story isn't between the dancers or the drinkers, but between the room and the man who keeps it safe. The night grows heavier, the air thick as syrup, and you notice something delicate fluttering through it. Bits of paper, not confetti, not receipts, napkins, folded, creased, scribbled upon. You realize these aren't accidents, they're letters, love notes, exchanged as casually as passing the salt. Mainstream fact in the 1920s, the art of note passing didn't die with high school classrooms. In speakeasies, with music blaring and voices drowned by smoke, paper scraps became tiny vessels of romance. A word or two, scrawled in pencil, could mean the difference between an ordinary night and a memory that clung for decades. You lean closer as one napkin passes hands. A woman with bobbed hair slides it under her glass, tapping twice to draw attention. The man across the table retrieves it as though he's just adjusting his drink. He unfolds it with a motion so subtle you'd miss it if you blinked. His grin says enough. The message worked. You'll never know what was written, but you don't need to. The gleam in his eyes is its own translation. Quirky tidbit napkin notes weren't always romantic. Some were practical, like warnings, "Cops outside," or "Don't trust the guy in the grey hat." Others were absurd, like doodles of saxophones wearing top hats. But it was the love notes that endured, tucked into purses or pockets, forgotten until found years later, with faded pencil smudges still legible. You imagine one now, a napkin folded 4 times, stained with gin, the words blurred at the edges. "Meet me by the fire escape at midnight." It sounds like a spy novel, but here it's just Saturday night. You chuckle, realizing modern text messages, those little blue bubbles, are just digital napkins passed across the table. Technology changes, desperation to connect doesn't. Historians still argue whether such notes were truly private. After all, bartenders, waiters, even other patrons could intercept them. Some say they were reckless, a flimsy shield against gossip. Others insist they carried an intimacy unmatched by whispered words. A napkin could outlive a kiss. A napkin could be folded and hidden, tucked under a pillow, preserved long after the night dissolved. You watch another exchange. A man doodles a tiny heart in the corner of his note before sliding it across the bar. The woman pretends to ignore it, tracing circles on her glass stem, but when she finally peeks inside, her lips curl into a smile that glows brighter than the chandelier overhead. The band swells, drowning the room in brass and cymbals, but you're fixated on the paper scraps drifting like feathers between tables. Each one is a story too fragile for daylight, yet strong enough to outlast the noise. You sip your drink, letting the taste linger. Somewhere, another napkin changes hands, carrying a secret only two people will ever know. And you can't help but think, in a world where words could ruin reputations, these little scribbles weren't just notes, they were lifelines. The napkins disappear into purses and coat pockets, but the sparkle on the dance floor steals your attention. Sequins flicker like constellations across the room, tiny galaxies stitched into dresses that shimmy with every step. You realize you're witnessing something more radical than glitter. Women moving differently, boldly, almost rebelliously. Flappers. And their flirtations don't hide. They perform. Mainstream fact, the 1920s flapper was the cultural symbol of a new woman. Short bobbed hair, hemlines at the knee, cigarettes dangling, cocktails in hand. They rejected corsets, danced the Charleston, and, most shocking of all, treated romance as something they could pursue rather than passively receive. It rattled polite society like a jazz note too sharp for old ears. A woman on the floor proves the point. She tosses her head back, hair bouncing against her cheeks, eyes locking on to a man across the room. Instead of waiting for him, she strides forward, her heels clacking against the wood, and pulls him onto the dance floor. You can practically hear the gasps from older onlookers, but she doesn't care. Her grin says it all. She's writing her own story. Quirky tidbit, flappers sometimes wore garter flasks, tiny bottles strapped to their thighs under their dresses. Imagine leaning in for a kiss, only to hear the faint clink of contraband liquor hidden in lace, a secret stash and a secret smile, both just out of reach. You chuckle, thinking modern romance has nothing on that kind of creativity. The flirtation here isn't coy, it's bold, direct, playful. A flapper tugs at a man's tie mid-spin, making him stumble and laugh. Another blows smoke rings deliberately into her partner's face, daring him to chase her through the haze. You watch as one woman tips her glass, splashing a drop on her date's sleeve, pretending it's an accident, though her smirk betrays her. It's all theatre, and you're sitting in the front row. Historians still argue whether flappers truly liberated women or simply traded one set of expectations for another. Were they free, or were they just trapped in a new costume of rebellion? The debates hum on like a bass line, unresolved and endless. But as you watch them on the floor, you know this much. Their confidence was real, and it electrified every room they entered. One flapper catches your gaze for a fleeting second. Her eyes sparkle, not with romance, but with mischief, as though she knows you're intruding on her world of secrets. She twirls, skirts flaring, and disappears into the crowd, leaving only the echo of perfume and laughter. You sip your drink and settle deeper into your seat. The sequins still shimmer, the bobbed hair still swings, and the flirtations spiral into the smoky air like champagne bubbles that refuse to burst. Somewhere someone's heart just tripped over a pair of high heels, and you were here to see it happen. The sequins blur into smoke, and your ears catch a sharper edge beneath the laughter. Not every romance here is playful, you realize. Some are dangerous, laced with power, secrets, and stakes that could shatter reputations. You lean toward a corner booth where the shadows look heavier, and there you see it, a politician with a wedding ring that glints like a warning sign, whispering far too closely to a woman who is not his wife. Mainstream fact: Prohibition-era politics were rife with scandal. Many elected officials publicly preached temperance while privately indulging in the very vices they outlawed. Speakeasies became the stage for hypocrisy, and romance tangled itself into the performance. Love, lust, and liquor all collided in ways that could ruin careers overnight. The man lifts his glass as though toasting something innocent. But you notice the way his other hand hovers just above hers, never quite touching, like a flame daring to kiss a wick. She leans in, her eyes sharp as daggers, and you realize this isn't just flirting. This is negotiation. Every smile is a clause, every laugh a contract. Quirky tidbit: mobsters weren't immune to these entanglements either. Al Capone, Chicago's most infamous bootlegger, reportedly had a string of mistresses, each story tangled with rumor and myth. Some claim he used jewelry and fur coats as tokens of affection. Others insist he preferred quieter gifts, like entire cases of imported champagne. Imagine trying to explain that love language. He bought me contraband worth more than a house. You glance back at the booth. The politician whispers something that makes the woman laugh too loudly, drawing the attention of nearby patrons. The bartender notices, polishing his glass a little more vigorously, perhaps debating whether to intervene. The couple doesn't care. They're too wrapped up in their own scandalous bubble. You can almost hear the whispers forming already. Who saw them, who will talk, and how quickly the rumors will fly by morning. Historians still argue whether these dangerous liaisons were driven by genuine passion or by opportunity. Was it love, or simply the intoxication of forbidden risk layered on forbidden alcohol? Some diaries suggest sincere affection, others hint at power plays disguised as romance. The truth may be forever blurred, like lipstick smudged on a champagne glass. You shift in your seat as another scene unfolds nearby. A man with slicked back hair and the heavy rings of a mob boss slides into the booth beside a glamorous blonde. His hand rests casually on her shoulder, but his eyes scan the room, calculating. She laughs, drapes her fur stole tighter, and leans in as though the world has shrunk to just the two of them. You know better. That relationship isn't private, it's a performance, watched by his men, weighed by his enemies, and remembered by everyone else. For a moment, you wonder what it must feel like to fall in love with someone whose name could end up in the papers the next day, splashed across headlines. Would the thrill outweigh the terror? Or is the terror itself the thrill? You don't get an answer, you only get the sight of two figures leaning closer in the smoky dark, their futures hanging on every sip of forbidden champagne. The band blares again, drowning out their whispers. But the memory lingers, heavy as the smoke. Dangerous liaisons that burned hot, burned fast, and burned in ways that could never be spoken aloud once the curtains opened to daylight. The band thunders through another number, and just as the crowd erupts into applause, you notice something different at a table near the back. Not pearls, not sequins, not the polished air of politicians or the coy boldness of flappers. Instead, broad shoulders, weathered hands, and a grin that seems carved from the open road. A bootlegger, you can almost smell the gasoline and river water on him, even beneath the haze of perfume and tobacco. Mainstream fact: bootleggers were the lifeline of speakeasies. They smuggled liquor across borders, lakes, and dirt roads, often outrunning federal agents in souped-up cars. Without them, these smoky rooms of jazz and flirtation would have been dry as sandpaper. And with their trade came an aura of danger that proved irresistible to many. The man reaches into his coat and pulls out not a gun, not a wad of cash, but a bottle. The woman beside him gasps softly, covering her lips as if he'd just proposed marriage. He sets it down with a flourish. Champagne. Real champagne. Not bathtub gin masked with lemon, Not bootleg whiskey, cut with God knows what, but the golden fizz of France itself. In that single gesture, you see it. This is his love letter, his devotion poured into contraband glass. Quirky tidbit, some bootleggers actually did use liquor as tokens of romance. In certain towns, giving a rare, imported bottle was considered as intimate as offering a ring. Picture that. Will you be mine? Sealed not with diamonds, but with Dom Perignon smuggled through a swamp. It sounds absurd, but in this world, a bottle worth a week's salary carried more weight than flowers ever could. The woman's eyes glimmer as he pops the cork. She laughs as it fizzes over, and instead of reaching for a napkin, she lifts her glass immediately, catching the spill like it's liquid gold. He watches her sip, his grin broadening with every swallow, as though he's measuring her affection in ounces consumed. Around them, heads turn, people recognize the rarity, the indulgence, but no one dares interrupt. Bootleggers, after all, carried more than champagne. They carried reputations sharp as switchblades. Here's the scholarly debate. Were these bootlegger romances genuine, or were they soaked in convenience? Some argue that women were drawn to the thrill, the access to luxury in a dry world. Others insist that danger itself is seductive, that loving someone who risks prison every night sharpens passion into something electric. Maybe both are true, maybe neither. History keeps the secret, sealed like a cork no one dares pop. The bootlegger leans closer, whispering something that makes her laugh again, softer this time. You can't hear the words, but you don't need to. His gift said it all. Devotion measured not in roses, but in risk. You sip your own glass of citrus-spiked gin and let the thought linger. Romance here is never ordinary. It's contraband, smuggled through shadows, hidden under coats, bubbling up like champagne fizz that refuses to stay quiet. The champagne corks fade into echoes, but your eyes catch something stranger, something sweeter. Across the dance floor, you see a woman with the kind of pearls that only an heiress could wear. They glisten like moonlight, each bead a reminder of bank vaults and grand estates. Yet there she is, laughing a little too loudly at the joke of a bartender whose hands are still stained from squeezing limes. Mainstream fact, the 1920s were one of the rare periods where class lines blurred in public nightlife. Speakeasies didn't always care about pedigrees. If you had the password and the nerve, you were in. That meant wealthy debutantes sometimes drank elbow to elbow with working-class clerks, dock workers, or, yes, bartenders. It was a social experiment nobody planned, but everyone remembered. You watch as the heiress leans closer, lowering her voice, her pearls brushing against the rough fabric of his sleeve. The bartender doesn't flinch, but you see the twitch of a smile tug at his lips. Their eyes meet, and for a heartbeat, the gulf between their worlds vanishes. The fizz of her champagne glass and the lime juice on his hands seem to merge into the same drink. Quirky tidbit. There are stories, half rumour, half truth, of wealthy daughters sneaking into speakeasies with allowances meant for opera tickets, only to leave on the arm of jazz drummers or soda jerks. Some even shocked their families by marrying far below their station. One notorious case involved a steel magnate's daughter who ditched her fiancé, a banker, for the speakeasy's house pianist. Her family called it scandal. She called it Tuesday. You chuckle, watching the scene unfold like theatre. He leans in and whispers something. She hides her mouth behind her glass, but her shoulders shake with laughter. A pair of matrons across the room glare, their eyebrows sharp enough to slice bread. But the young woman doesn't care. She's tired of embroidery circles and polite luncheons. She wants danger in sequins and love in the form of a poorly mixed gin fizz. Historians still argue whether these cross-class romances were rebellions or just passing fancies. Did heiresses genuinely crave freedom from their gilded cages, or were they simply chasing novelty before retreating back into drawing rooms? The question lingers, unanswered, like smoke caught in the rafters. The bartender finally sets down his rag, steps around the counter, and offers her his hand. The pearls flash again as she accepts, and together they melt into the dance floor. You imagine the whispers forming. Can you believe she's with him? Doesn't she know who she is? But in the speakeasy, the only identity that matters is the one you choose for the night. And so the heiress and the bartender spin together, their laughter cutting across the jazz, their secret a tiny rebellion against a world that says they don't belong. Maybe tomorrow she'll return to her estate, maybe he'll pour drinks for another girl. But tonight, for just a few stolen hours, class means nothing. Only the music does. The music blurs into a softer rhythm, the kind you feel more than hear, and in that lull you notice something rarer still. A couple swaying at the edge of the dance floor, holding each other just a little tighter than most. Their eyes dart nervously around the room, as if every glance could turn into a spotlight. Their skin tones mark them as an interracial pair, something that in the 1920s was more forbidden than liquor itself. Mainstream fact, while prohibition laws targeted alcohol, much of America was still deeply segregated. Interracial relationships faced not only stigma but also legal barriers. In many states, anti-miscegenation laws criminalized marriage across racial lines. Yet speakeasies, often tucked away from polite society, became some of the few spaces where such romances could quietly unfold, however precariously. You watch them move cautiously, their hands brushing like thieves passing contraband. The woman laughs at something her partner whispers, then quickly covers her mouth as though laughter itself could betray them. He steadies her hand, their bodies pulling close, and for a moment they're just another couple lost in the music. But the tension in their shoulders tells you otherwise. Quirky tidbit: some jazz clubs, particularly in Harlem, were among the first nightlife spaces where black and white patrons mingled more openly, though not without contradiction. The famous Cotton Club, for instance, showcased black performers, but barred black customers. Other venues, though, allowed more mingling, creating rare opportunities for connections that society outside the walls would have condemned. You can almost hear the whispers forming in the shadows. A woman nearby nudges her friend, eyes darting toward the couple, and mutters behind her hand. The bartender catches the glance, and for once, pointedly, turns away, choosing silence over scrutiny. You realize it's a kind of protection. In this dim room, sometimes the best shield is willful blindness. Historians still argue whether speakeasies were truly progressive havens or just temporary escapes. Were these romances seeds of genuine change, or were they fragile illusions destined to shatter under the morning sun? The debate flickers endlessly, like the glow of a cigarette that burns bright only until the ash drops. The couple clings closer, eyes shut now, rocking as if the rest of the room doesn't exist. You know the odds against them are steep, that their story may never find a happy ending in daylight. But tonight, for one fragile hour, they've carved out a world where their love is possible, sheltered by jazz, smoke, and shadows. You take another sip of your drink, letting the warmth spread through your chest. You don't know their names, you'll never know their future, but you feel the weight of their secret. In a world where even glances could be dangerous, they choose to hold each other anyway. And isn't that the most defiant romance of all? The bass thumps, the trumpet squeals, and suddenly the dance floor is more than a floor. It's a stage. You lean forward, watching the way couples transform the Charleston into coded theatre. Every kick, every spin, every dip means more than just movement. It's communication. Mainstream fact, the Charleston exploded in popularity during the 1920s, becoming the definitive dance of the jazz age. It wasn't just about rhythm, it was about rebellion. Its wild kicks and syncopated steps shocked older generations used to polite waltzes. Ministers condemned it as scandalous, which of course made young people love it even more. A woman in a glittering dress kicks high, her fringe flying like fireworks. Her partner responds with a shuffle that sends laughter rippling through the crowd. But you notice something subtle. The kicks are deliberate, timed to send messages. When she leans too far into him, it's an invitation. When he exaggerates his steps, it's a promise. The dance itself becomes a secret language, spoken with ankles and elbows instead of lips. Quirky tidbit. Some dance instructors tried to sanitize the Charleston, teaching a slower, less scandalous version they claimed was safer for public morals. Imagine someone walking into this speakeasy and suggesting everyone tone it down. You'd have seen cocktails thrown faster than dance shoes. A couple near the center draws your attention. She kicks with mischievous precision, nearly brushing his knee, daring him to catch her. He responds with a sly spin, pulling her in at the last second. The crowd claps not because of the steps, but because they see what's really happening. He's courting her in public, but only the two of them know the depth of what's being said. Historians still argue whether these dances were mere entertainment or genuine acts of coded rebellion. Was the Charleston just a fad, or was it a declaration of independence, especially for women who now danced without needing permission? The debate lingers like a cymbals ring after the band cuts off. You watch the floor erupt again, dozens of couples sending messages through every twist and stomp. One woman spins twice, signaling her availability. Another clutches her partner tightly, marking him as claimed. To outsiders, it's chaos. To insiders, it's choreography of desire. The music swells, the tempo racing, and suddenly the whole floor is alive with coded sparks. Shoes slap wood, sequins flash, and hearts pound as messages pass invisibly through rhythm. You smile, realizing that while letters and whispers might vanish, the dance floor writes confessions that no one can erase. As the band crashes into its finale, the dancers collapse in laughter and sweat, disguising their secrets as exhaustion. But you saw them. You saw how every step was a love letter written in kicks and spins. The dancers scatter, laughing and breathless, as the band cools into something smoother. A crooner leans into the microphone, voice syrupy and low, filling the room like velvet poured from a glass. You notice how the couples who had been stomping and spinning now settle into slower embraces. The music has shifted, and so has the mood. Mainstream fact. By the mid-1920s, radios were spreading into homes across America. For the first time, ordinary people could hear the same jazz songs broadcast live from clubs in New York or Chicago. Popular singers became household names, and certain tunes set the stage for romance in both private parlors and hidden speakeasies. The singer draws a line about moonlight and rivers, and you watch the room change. Men lean closer, women soften against their shoulders. Even the bartenders pause a beat longer when pouring drinks. It's as though the melody itself grants permission to drop pretenses. Words that felt risky to speak in daylight now ride safely on the notes of a song. Quirky tidbit. Radio announcers often claimed songs could melt hearts faster than champagne. One ad for a phonograph promised that playing the latest jazz record was as good as giving roses. It sounds silly, but here in this speakeasy you see it's true. A man hums along badly, earning a laugh from his date. She swats his arm, but her smile lingers, proving the song has already done its work. A couple at the bar sways in their seats, glasses forgotten. You catch fragments of their whispers. This one's ours. Every time it plays, you realize that couples weren't just drinking here, they were collecting soundtracks for their own private stories. A single chorus could etch itself into memory more permanently than any ring. Historians still argue whether the rise of jazz radio democratized romance or commercialized it. Did the airwaves bring people together, or did they package love into something you could buy between advertisements? The debate is endless and maybe irrelevant, because here, in this smoky room, the effect is undeniable. The music binds hearts faster than prohibition agents can tear them apart. The crooner lingers on the final note, holding it until the room feels like it might break. When silence finally drops, no one claps right away. They're too wrapped up in each other, eyes locked, hands clasped, breaths mingling. The music may have stopped, but the spell hasn't broken. You sip your drink, smiling at the thought. In a world where letters could be intercepted and whispers overheard, radio gave lovers a shield. A song on the air wasn't incriminating. It was just melody, but for those who shared it, it was everything. The crooner's voice trails off and the room exhales as if waking from a dream. Glasses clink again, laughter rises, and then, suddenly, the spell is broken by something harsher. A shout from the door, a crash of boots, the unmistakable rattle of authority. You flinch as the lights blaze brighter than they should, and panic flickers across the speakeasy like fire chasing oil. A police raid. Mainstream fact, raids were a constant threat during Prohibition. Federal agents, known as Prohibition agents, or more dramatically as revenuers, barged into clubs, smashing bottles and hauling patrons into the street. Bribes often softened the blows, but no one ever felt entirely safe. For lovers, a raid meant more than losing a drink. It meant risking exposure, separation, even scandal. You watch chaos bloom. A couple, mid-kiss, jerks apart, their eyes darting for escape. Dancers freeze in poses that look absurd now, arms flung mid-spin. Bartenders shove bottles under counters, but the smell of liquor already hangs heavy in the air. Quirky tidbit, some clubs had trap doors and revolving walls designed for raids. Patrons could vanish in seconds, sometimes straight into basements or hidden stairwells. In one notorious New York speakeasy, the piano itself could be flipped to reveal a tunnel entrance. You half expect the band here to spin their instruments like carnival rides and disappear. A woman clutches her pearls, her date pulling her urgently toward the back curtain. Another pair dashes for the kitchen, nearly toppling a waiter's tray. But the most heartbreaking sight is the couple you've been watching all night, their hands torn apart as they scramble in opposite directions, each forced to save themselves. The man ducks into the crowd while the woman vanishes through a side door, her sequins flashing once before disappearing into dark. Historians still argue whether police raids were truly effective at curbing drinking, or whether they simply added fuel to the fire by making the forbidden more thrilling. Some claim raids discouraged romance by scattering couples. Others insist they made love even sharper by testing its resilience. Nothing proves devotion like finding each other again after a night of terror. The noise rises, shouts, broken glass, the hiss of beer spilling across wood. You press yourself against the wall, heart hammering, as an officer's flashlight beam slices through the haze. For a moment, it catches two lovers crouched beneath a table, their faces pressed together, pretending to be invisible. The officer's light moves on, and they remain, still clinging, still whispering, as if their love is stronger than the law. You exhale slowly as the raid surges past, the chaos rolling like a storm through the room. Somewhere, lovers are scattering into the streets, heels clicking on cobblestones, hands reaching in vain. The music has stopped, the glasses are broken, But the stories, oh the stories, have only just begun. The raid leaves the air ragged, as though the smoke itself has been startled. You slip through the side door, following the trail of hurried footsteps. Outside, the night is damp and restless. Rain spatters against the alley, making the cobblestones slick beneath your shoes. You hear laughter, strained, nervous, relieved, coming from a nearby stairwell where a few couples have huddled to catch their breath. Mainstream fact. After raids, it wasn't unusual for speakeasy patrons to scatter into nearby apartments or safe houses. These weren't formal hideouts, but sympathetic neighbors or rented flats where regulars could wait out the danger. In big cities, whole networks existed, a shadow hospitality industry keeping the nightlife alive. You follow the sound of footsteps into one such place. A door creaks open, revealing a dim apartment with peeling wallpaper and mismatched chairs. Inside, couples trickle in, shaking rain from their coats, shoes squeaking on warped wood. The mood shifts, less performance, more raw. Without the band, without the clinking glasses, romance is stripped down to whispers and trembling hands. Quirky tidbit. Some safe houses were run by widows who charged a few coins for refuge, offering nothing more than tea and a couch. Imagine fleeing federal agents only to sip chamomile while explaining to your date why you thought sneaking into an illegal gin joint was a great idea. Romance on a budget. You notice one pair huddled on a sofa, their shoulders touching as though they might fall apart if they separated. His tie is askew, her pearls tangled, but their smiles are wider than ever. The raid didn't scare them apart, it bound them tighter. Their laughter rings softly in the shabby room, like champagne bubbles that refuse to go flat. Historians still argue whether these post-raid reunions strengthened relationships or exposed their fragility. Some lovers never found each other again after a chaotic escape. Others swore those stolen hours hiding in safe houses were the truest test of devotion. It's hard to measure. Love either withered under pressure or burned hotter in the dark. A lamp flickers, casting long shadows across the walls. Someone brews coffee on a rattling stove, its bitter smell mingling with damp coats. A woman tucks her heels into a corner and leans her head against her date's shoulder, murmuring, "We'll laugh about this someday." He chuckles, though his hand still trembles slightly around hers. You realize this shabby apartment holds more tenderness than the glittering speakeasy ever could. Here, without sequins or jazz, romance is quieter but more genuine. The danger stripped away the theatre, leaving only two people clinging to the relief of being together, safe for another hour. Outside, police whistles fade into the distance, swallowed by the night. Inside, the whispers soften into sighs. You sit back, letting the quiet settle over you. The raid has passed. The speakeasy will reopen tomorrow, but tonight love hides in peeling wallpaper and steaming mugs, alive in its simplest form. By the time the rain eases, the apartment has emptied. Lovers slip back into the night, returning to their homes or to whatever new hiding places the city provides. You drift along too, and before long you find yourself back inside another speakeasy, this one humming again as though raids and arrests were just rumors from a parallel world. But something feels different now. The energy is sharper, the glance is stickier, the stories louder, and the gossip? It spreads faster than the gin. Mainstream fact. Gossip was the lifeblood of the jazz-age nightlife. With newspapers tightly censored and respectable society pretending these clubs didn't exist, word of mouth became the true press. Stories of romances, scandals, and betrayals travelled from one speakeasy to another faster than a smuggler's car. A whispered rumour could leap across neighbourhoods in a single night, reshaping reputations before breakfast. You hear it immediately. A woman leans toward her friend, voice low but animated. "Did you see who she left with?" Her friend gasps, clutching her pearls with more drama than sincerity. At another table, a man whispers, "I heard he's been meeting her here every Thursday." His companion chuckles darkly, shaking his head as though it's already old news. Quirky tidbit: some jazz clubs actually encouraged gossip as entertainment. A few even hired professional whisperers, performers who circulated the room spreading outrageous stories just to stir the pot and keep the energy crackling. Imagine a stand-up comedian whose punchlines were rumors, half true, half invented, all irresistible. You chuckle when you overhear one man claiming he saw a senator doing the Charleston with a showgirl. His audience bursts out laughing, debating whether it's true or just wishful slander. The details don't matter. The telling of the story is the fun. In these rooms, gossip isn't just currency, it's the entire economy. Historians still argue whether gossip in speakeasies was dangerous or harmless. Some suggest it destroyed reputations, pushing people into ruin. Others argue it acted more like entertainment, a harmless way to make the ordinary night shimmer with scandal. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere between. You sip your drink, watching as couples navigate this invisible web. Every laugh, every touch, every shared cigarette is noticed. Not by everyone, perhaps, but by someone. And by tomorrow it will be exaggerated, embroidered, repeated until it hardly resembles the truth. In the corner, a woman slips a note into her partner's hand. Within minutes, someone across the room whispers, "Did you see that? They're running away together." By the time you stand, the rumor has grown into a tale of elopement to Cuba. You can't help but smile. Romance here is as much about perception as reality. The band plays on, brass notes covering whispers only for a moment before the gossip bubbles up again. You realize the music, the liquor, the flirting, they all fade with time. But the stories are eternal, carried by tongues quicker than any trumpet. The rumors buzz like bees, and soon they find a new hive, matchbooks. You glance at a man fiddling with one, his thumb tracing its cardboard edge. He tears a strip free, scribbles something quickly with a pencil stub, then flicks it shut and slides it across the table. His companion picks it up, pretending to light a cigarette, and tucks it smoothly into her clutch, a love note disguised as something ordinary enough to vanish in smoke. Mainstream fact. Matchbooks were everywhere in the 1920s, handed out by clubs, hotels, even politicians' campaigns. Small, cheap, and easy to carry, they became the perfect canvas for quick messages. Some historians even credit them as one of the first forms of mass advertising. In speakeasies, though, they doubled as miniature diaries, words scrawled in haste, flames ready to erase them forever. You pick up one left behind on the bar. On the inside flap, a crude heart has been doodled, with initials pressed hard enough to tear the cardboard. L+R. You chuckle softly, wondering if L and R ever made it past that night, or if the matchbook burned before morning. Quirky tidbit: some clubs even printed matchbooks with romantic poems already inside. Tiny verses, sometimes bawdy, sometimes earnest, tucked between the sticks of fire. Patrons swapped them like keepsakes, a pocket-sized sonnet to carry home. One notorious example promised, "Strike me, and I'll spark your heart." You can't decide whether to laugh or applaud. Across the room, another exchange unfolds. A woman slips her lipstick across a matchbook flap, pressing her imprint in scarlet wax. She hands it off without a word. The man who receives it studies the kiss mark as though it's the most sacred relic in the room. He tucks it into his jacket pocket like treasure, though you know one stray spark could erase it forever. Historians still argue whether these artifacts should be taken seriously. Were they genuine tokens of affection, or just fleeting novelties meant to amuse for a night? Museums hold a few preserved examples, fragile as moth wings, but most were likely destroyed, burned away with the very fire they contained. Love notes designed to self-destruct. You watch as the matchbooks circulate. Some scribbled with phone numbers, others with crude jokes, a few with words so tender you almost feel guilty glimpsing them. In this world where permanence is dangerous, romance must be small, portable, and flammable. The band starts a new tune, brassy and bold, but you're still thinking about the matchbooks in pockets and purses all around you. Dozens of tiny flames waiting to be struck, carrying secrets that will vanish in smoke or linger in memory long after the cardboard turns to ash. The matchbooks vanish into purses and pockets, but the mood in the speakeasy shifts again. You notice it in the eyes, in the way conversations tighten, in how laughter suddenly has a sharper edge. Not all romance here is sweet. Some of it is jagged, carved from jealousy, that simmers like a gin fizz gone sour. Mainstream fact, jealousy was practically built into jazz-age nightlife. Speakeasies weren't private parlours. They were crowded, chaotic, unpredictable. Lovers danced within arm's reach of strangers, and temptation swirled in every smoke ring. It was a recipe for rivalries, misunderstandings, and more than a few barroom confrontations. You spot one now. A man in a pinstripe suit glares across the room, his hand tightening around his glass. The woman beside him leans a little too warmly toward another man, laughing at his joke, her pearls bobbing like tiny pendulums with every nod. The pinstripe's jaw clenches. He taps his glass against the table, in rhythm with the band, but it's not music he's keeping time with, it's fury. Quirky tidbit, some speakeasies actually encouraged a little jealousy to stir the atmosphere. A few employed professional flirts, women paid to chat up lonely men or distract couples just to keep drinks flowing and stories simmering. Imagine discovering the woman you thought was enchanted by your charm was really on the payroll, romance by the hour, billed in cocktails. You glance back just as the man in pinstripes rises abruptly. His chair screeches, heads turn, and the tension cuts through the jazz like a cymbal crash. But instead of a fight, you witness something subtler. He strides across the room, places a steady hand on the woman's shoulder, and leans down to whisper something sharp in her ear. She freezes, then slowly withdraws from her new companion, her laugh evaporating into silence. The scene dissolves without fists, but the glances thrown could have bruised. Historians still argue whether jealousy in speakeasies reflected genuine love or simple ego. Was it devotion that made men bristle when another cut in? Or was it pride, bruised by public flirtations? The line is blurry, and maybe it always has been. Another scene unfolds nearby. Two women lock eyes, both clearly vying for the attention of the same jazz drummer. He twirls his sticks, oblivious, while sparks fly between the rivals. One of them smirks and saunters to the floor, pulling him into a dance mid-song. The other glares, then claps too loudly, trying to drown the sting with performance. The drummer, he just keeps playing, probably unaware he's the lead in tonight's unscripted drama. You sip your drink and realize that jealousy here doesn't always explode. It lingers. It sharpens glances, tilts laughter, turns whispers into weapons. Lovers walk a tightrope, balancing between passion and possession, every step lit by the flickering lantern of suspicion. And yet, the room doesn't fall apart. Somehow the jazz keeps playing, and the romances, jealous or not, survive another round. Maybe that's the real magic. Love in a speakeasy wasn't about perfection. It was about endurance in the haze of smoke, gin, and human flaws. The jealousy fades into the background hum, but another story begins to take shape at a corner table draped in shadow. The crowd parts just enough for you to glimpse the unmistakable gleam of a diamond bracelet, heavy and gaudy, sliding down the wrist of a woman whose laugh rings sharper than the clinking glasses. Beside her sits a man with a kind of presence that doesn't need announcing, a mob boss, or at least someone orbiting close enough to smell of cigars and danger. Mainstream fact: organized crime thrived during Prohibition. Figures like Al Capone in Chicago and Lucky Luciano in New York built empires on smuggled booze, gambling, and protection rackets. With power came wealth, and with wealth came women who lingered at their sides, not just companions, but keepers of secrets that could topple entire empires. You notice the way she leans in, whispering something you'll never hear, her lips brushing dangerously close to his ear. He chuckles, not the laugh of a man amused, but the rumble of someone who knows his reputation is part of the performance. Around them, bodyguards pretend to ignore the intimacy, though their eyes scan the room like hawks. Quirky tidbit: some mobsters treated their mistresses like royalty, showering them with furs, cars, and even entire apartments. One infamous story tells of a mistress who demanded an orchestra to serenade her at breakfast. The mobster obliged, though one imagines the neighbours weren't as thrilled. Romance in this world wasn't about flowers, it was about excess, sometimes absurd, always dangerous. But you also sense the fragility in the scene. The woman toys with her bracelet, her smile flashing bright, but her eyes dart nervously whenever he looks away. Does she love him, or does she fear him? Historians still argue whether mob mistresses were genuine partners or prisoners of luxury. Some diaries suggest devotion, others hint at cages lined with velvet. The truth, like smoke, slips through fingers. The boss raises his glass and she mirrors him, their movements rehearsed, as if every toast is part of their pact. For a fleeting moment she presses her hand against his, fingers curling around the rings that gleam on his knuckles. To anyone else it looks tender. To you it looks like survival disguised as affection. A laugh erupts from another table, startling her. She drops her bracelet onto the floor, and it clatters louder than the band. For 1 second, the room freezes. Then the boss picks it up slowly, eyes locking with hers, and places it back on her wrist. His smile is thin, deliberate, almost theatrical. Everyone exhales as though the whole club was holding its breath. You realize this romance isn't like the others you've seen tonight. It's not scribbled on napkins or whispered in smoke. It's carved into contracts, cemented with fear, and guarded by men with pistols under their coats. Love here is a performance, every gesture heavy with implication. And while the music plays on, you know that when it stops, so might the illusion. The mob boss and his mistress fade back into the smoke, but you notice another kind of romance taking shape across the room, quieter, less gilded, but no less daring. A woman folds a ticket and slips it into her companion's hand. It's creased, worn, the ink smudged by nervous fingers. You lean closer and catch the detail stamped across the paper. A train ticket, not just across town, across states. A love that refuses to stay confined to one speakeasy. Mainstream fact: in the 1920s, train travel was the lifeline of long-distance romance. Airplanes were still novelties, but railways crisscrossed the nation, making weekend affairs and cross-country rendezvous possible. Lovers carried tickets like promises, proof of their devotion, folded neatly into pockets and purses. The man's thumb brushes the paper and his eyes soften. He presses it into his wallet as though it's more precious than any diamond bracelet. The woman exhales with relief, sipping her cocktail slowly, the fizzing bubbles rising like her hopes. You realize the note wasn't just "meet me at midnight," it was "meet me in another city, another life." Quirky tidbit: some bootleggers actually doubled as couriers of love. They'd tuck letters or small gifts into cases of liquor, delivering not just contraband but affection. Imagine ordering a bottle of rum and finding a pressed flower or a folded photograph hidden beside it. Illegal shipments becoming love letters with barcodes of secrecy. You glance around and see others with travel on their minds. A man at the bar unfolds a bus timetable, tracing routes with his finger, while a woman rests her chin on his shoulder. Another couple speaks urgently, maps spread between their drinks, their whispers full of plans too fragile for daylight. Historians still argue whether these long-distance romances were sustainable or doomed from the start. Some claim they were impulsive bursts of passion, sparked by gin and glamour, extinguished by the reality of miles and obligations. Others argue they laid the groundwork for marriages and partnerships that lasted decades, proving love can ride steel tracks as faithfully as it sways on a dance floor. The band swells into another tune, but you're fixated on the quiet exchanges, the tickets pressed into palms, the promises whispered across maps. In a world where raids could scatter lovers in seconds, the idea of hopping a train and starting anew carried both thrill and desperation. The man with the ticket squeezes the woman's hand, and they exchange a look that says more than any jazz lyric could. You know their journey won't be easy, distance never is. But for now, in this smoky room, the ticket is enough. A symbol of hope tucked between gin stains and cigarette ash. You sip your drink, letting the thought linger. Romance in the jazz age wasn't just hidden in corners. Sometimes it stretched across states, carried on rails, stamped on paper that promised tomorrow. The train tickets disappear into wallets and handbags, but the atmosphere in the speakeasy carries a softer note now. You hear it in the lull between songs, in the way couples lean their foreheads together, in the way the chatter lowers to a murmur. Tonight, for some, isn't just about flirtation or scandal. Tonight is about vows, quiet, whispered, fragile as smoke. Mainstream fact, though most weddings of the 1920s took place in churches or town halls, there are scattered reports of couples exchanging vows in speakeasies. Not legally binding ceremonies, of course, but symbolic unions, private promises witnessed by friends, bartenders, or even the house band. Midnight weddings bound not by law, but by love and jazz. You catch one unfolding in the far corner. A young man clutches a woman's hands, his fingers trembling more than his voice. "Here," he says, sliding a thin silver band across the table. It's not expensive, probably bought from a pawn shop or pulled from a mother's jewelry box, but the way her eyes shimmer when she sees it makes the entire room glow. Quirky tidbit. Some couples used cocktail straws or even cigar bands as stand-ins for rings during these ceremonies. Others slipped champagne corks onto fingers, the circle of corks serving as a temporary promise until something sturdier could be found. Imagine raising your hand years later and saying, "We were married with a champagne cork under a jazz trumpet solo." The band notices what's happening. Without a word, the tempo slows. A saxophone croons gently, the trumpet softens, and the piano's chords spread like lace across the smoky air. The couple stands awkward but glowing, and a few patrons hush their conversations instinctively. For one fragile moment, the speakeasy becomes a chapel, its stained glass replaced by sequins, its altar a rickety table. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies should be taken seriously. Were they legitimate unions of devotion or playful theatrics fueled by gin and adrenaline? Some letters discovered decades later described couples who truly considered themselves married from that night forward. Others laughed it off, moving on with their lives as though the vows dissolved with the smoke. You watch the bartender step forward, towel draped over his arm like a priest's stole. He raises his glass and declares, "To love that lasts longer than gin." The room chuckles, glasses lift, and the newly promised couple kiss under a drizzle of applause. It isn't legal, but it's real enough for tonight. You sip your drink, smiling softly. In this world of impermanence, where raids scatter lovers, and gossip twists truth, these midnight weddings are acts of defiance. They whisper, "Even if tomorrow forgets us, tonight we are forever." The cheers for the midnight vows fade and the music picks back up with a playful swing. Yet as the laughter returns, you feel something quieter creeping beneath it. A question. Were those vows real, or were they just another illusion in a room already built on smoke and secrecy? You look around and realize that much of what you've seen tonight might never survive the sunrise. Mainstream fact. Sociologists of the 1920s often worried that speakeasies blurred the line between genuine connection and temporary indulgence. For many, romance in these clubs was fleeting, lasting only as long as the music played. Critics claimed these relationships were shallow, fueled more by cocktails and rebellion than by true commitment. But for the people inside, that line was harder to see. A couple near the piano illustrates the point. They lean close, faces inches apart, but there's a hollowness in their laughter. The man strokes the woman's hand as though he's done it 100 times before, and she smiles without letting it reach her eyes. Their bodies say romance, but their silence says routine. You wonder if they'll even remember each other's names when tomorrow comes. Quirky tidbit, some patrons actually kept notebooks of their speakeasy romances, jotting down names, details, or even drawings of the people they met. These miniature diaries read today like scrapbooks of temporary infatuations. One surviving example includes the line, "I think I loved her, though it might have just been the gin fizz. Honest, if nothing else." The more you watch, the more you sense the fragility. A man tells a woman he'll call her tomorrow, but you know he won't. A woman slips her number onto a napkin, but you see him crumple it into his pocket without care. For every vow whispered in sincerity, a dozen more are tossed into the night like cigarette ash. Historians still argue whether speakeasy romances deserve to be remembered as love stories at all. Were they genuine connections, or were they stage plays fueled by jazz, gin, and loneliness? Perhaps the truth lies in the in-between. Maybe some were lies, but others, however few, were real enough to matter. You sip your drink, tasting both the sweetness and the sting. Maybe love doesn't have to be permanent to be meaningful. Maybe a single night, a single song, a single kiss, stolen in smoke can carry as much weight as a lifetime. Or maybe that's just the gin whispering through your veins. The band kicks into a lively riff and the crowd erupts in cheers. Couples spin, laugh and kiss again as though the question doesn't matter. Perhaps it doesn't. In this world, romance doesn't have to last forever. It only has to last long enough to outshine the darkness outside. The trumpet eases into a softer tune, and your mind lingers on the puzzle of what's real and what's smoke. You can't help but wonder how much of what you've seen tonight has been captured anywhere beyond this room. Diaries, letters, newspaper scraps, history leaves so few traces of the heart, and the ones that survive are always incomplete. Mainstream fact, very few first-hand records of speakeasy romances survive. Prohibition was already illegal. Lovers had little incentive to write down their secrets. Some historians have pieced together fragments from personal diaries, trial transcripts, or police reports. But the picture is hazy at best. It leaves wide gaps for speculation, and speculation is where the myths grow. You imagine one such diary now, a leather-bound book hidden at the bottom of a cedar chest, its pages stained with cigarette ash. A woman's handwriting fills the margins with fragments. Met him after the band played, his smile in the smoke. Promised me Paris, though I'd settle for Cleveland. Did she mean it? Was it romance, or just a gin-fueled joke? You'll never know. Quirky tidbit. Some scholars point to cocktail napkins, matchbooks, and even graffiti etched into bathroom walls as primary sources of jazz-age romance. Hardly what you'd expect in an archive. Imagine a historian in white gloves squinting at a faded doodle that says M+J forever, debating whether it counts as legitimate evidence. It's both ridiculous and oddly touching. The debate never ends. Historians still argue whether speakeasy love was genuine passion suppressed by daylight society, or simply thrill-seeking dressed in sequins. One camp insists the romances were profound, shaping later cultural shifts in gender roles and independence. Another claims they were mostly illusions, flirtations born of smoke and saxophone, evaporating with the sunrise. You sip your drink and let the thoughts swirl. Maybe both are true. Maybe some of those couples really did find lasting love, slipping rings onto fingers when no one was watching. Maybe others never saw each other again after the band packed up. History records wars and laws. It rarely records stolen glances across a crowded room. And so the story of speakeasy romance remains half written, half imagined. Like a jazz riff, part notes on the page, part improvisation. You'll never know where fact ends and fancy begins. But maybe that's the point. Some loves are meant to be mysteries, whispered only to the smoke. The debates fade from your mind as dawn threatens the edges of the night. The music slows, the crowd thins, and you notice a kind of melancholy weaving itself into the air. Sequins no longer sparkle, they droop under the weight of exhaustion. Cigarettes burn down to stubs, and couples, once laughing loudly, now walk hand in hand toward the exits, their shoes scuffing the sticky floor. Romance at a speakeasy doesn't end with fireworks. It ends with the bittersweet quiet of a night giving way to morning. Mainstream fact. Many speakeasies close their doors before dawn to avoid police suspicion, sending their patrons out into the early morning streets. Lovers often left together, shoes in hand, heels dangling, ties loosened, makeup smudged. The walk home became its own ritual, a liminal space between the fantasy of the night and the reality of daylight. You follow one pair onto the street. The man's jacket is draped across the woman's shoulders too big, sleeves flapping against her sides. She laughs softly, balancing on the cobblestones barefoot, her sequined shoes swinging from her hand. He steadies her with one arm, his own steps uncertain. They don't speak much, but they don't need to. Their silence is heavier than words. Quirky tidbit. Some couples never made it home at all, not because of scandal, but because of exhaustion. There are accounts of pairs falling asleep in taxis curled up together, only to wake hours later parked in front of the wrong house. Drivers, too polite or too amused to interrupt, simply let them dream. But as you watch the couple on the cobblestones, you sense something deeper. The glamour has peeled away. No champagne bubbles, no jazz trumpets. Just two people walking, their bodies leaning against each other to keep upright. You wonder, is this love, or is it simply the residue of gin and music? Historians still argue whether these dawn walks were the true test of speakeasy romances. Did couples survive the transition from sequined fantasy to grey morning light? Or did the spell break the instant the music stopped? For every story of a lifelong marriage that began at a speakeasy, there are dozens more of fleeting encounters, forgotten before the next Saturday night. The couple pauses beneath a flickering street lamp. She adjusts his tie, clumsy but tender, and he kisses her forehead in return. Then they continue walking, their shadows stretching long behind them. You realize that even if this romance dissolves tomorrow, for now it exists. Real, tangible, captured in the fragile hour between night and day. You slip your hands into your pockets, feeling the chill creep in. The speakeasy has closed, the streets are quiet, but the echoes of its romances still linger in the morning air, fragile as smoke, strong as memory. The dawn edges higher, painting the city in pale grey, but inside the last stragglers' minds, the night hasn't ended yet. You watch as couples linger at doorways, reluctant to part. Goodbyes stretch longer than the time it takes to actually say them. A hand rests on a sleeve too long, a smile hovers in the half-light, and every pause feels like one more chance to delay the inevitable. Mainstream fact, last call wasn't just a signal for finishing drinks. In speakeasies, it often marked the beginning of long, winding farewells. Patrons clung to the safety of the shadows, knowing that once they stepped outside, the spell of secrecy would dissolve. Lovers in particular stretched these moments, dragging out partings until dawn made them impossible. At the corner of the alley, a woman adjusts her hat, pretending to fuss with the brim so she doesn't have to leave yet. Her partner offers to walk her home, though you sense his home is in the opposite direction. They stroll anyway, shoes clicking slowly, every few steps stopping to murmur something, one more story, one more laugh, one more reason not to let go. Quirky tidbit, some couples developed elaborate rituals for these goodbyes. One pair reportedly tapped their shoes together 3 times before parting, like a private code of affection. Another always shared a final cigarette, passing it back and forth until it burned down to the filter, leaving neither willing to waste the last drag. Love disguised as superstition, sealed in smoke. You watch another couple near the speakeasy door. They stand so close their shadows overlap, yet neither moves to leave. The woman whispers, "One more song," even though the band has already packed up. The man chuckles, humming a tune softly, swaying her in place. No music, no dance floor, just 2 figures clinging to the last heartbeat of the night. Historians still argue whether these long goodbyes were genuine reluctance or simply part of the performance. Did couples really struggle to part because they'd found something meaningful, or were they just drunk on gin and the illusion of romance? Like so much of speakeasy life, the answer is both and neither. The sun climbs higher, the lamplight fades, and eventually the goodbyes must end. Lovers step apart, promises whispered. Tomorrow night, same place. Write me. You can almost hear the unspoken caveat in each one. If the cops don't raid, if the rumors don't spread, if we both still want to. You sip your last watered-down drink and watch the final couples slip away. The alley grows quiet, the city returns to its sober rhythm, but the echoes of those prolonged goodbyes still cling to the air. For one night at least, no one wanted to let go. By the time the sun sits firmly over the rooftops, the city has already shifted. Delivery boys push carts down the street, milk bottles clink against doors, and respectable shopkeepers sweep sidewalks as if the night's chaos never happened. But you know better. You've just walked out of an entire world that's now dissolving like smoke. And with Prohibition weakening, you sense that this hidden world is on borrowed time. Mainstream fact, Prohibition officially ended in December 1933 with the ratification of the 21st Amendment. By then, public tolerance for the noble experiment had collapsed. Speakeasies either shuttered quietly or transformed into legitimate bars. What had once been clandestine romance wrapped in jazz and danger suddenly became just dating over legal cocktails. You picture the last nights before repeal. Lovers still sneaking through curtained doors, but with less fear. Bartenders more relaxed, raids less common. The danger that once bound couples together like contraband lace began to fade, and with it, some romances simply dissolved. The thrill was gone like champagne that's lost its fizz. Quirky tidbit, when Prohibition ended, some speakeasies held mock funerals. Coffins were carried through the streets, filled with empty gin bottles, as if to bury the age of secrecy. Imagine standing there with a lover, laughing at the absurdity, while realizing that your romance, too, might be lowered into the ground with the final toast. You glance into one of the clubs being dismantled. The velvet curtains are torn down, the hidden compartments opened, the piano wheeled away. The ghosts of whispered promises cling to the dust motes in the air. You almost hear a laugh from the back booth, a cork popping, a kiss stolen. But when you blink, it's gone. Historians still argue whether the end of Prohibition killed speakeasy romance or simply pushed it into new forms. Did lovers seek new thrills, or did they finally settle into daylight relationships, no longer needing shadows to protect them? The record is ambiguous like everything else from this era. Some couples married quietly. Others vanished from each other's lives the moment liquor became legal again. The streets brighten with daylight, and you realize the age itself is slipping away. Soon the jazz will be broadcast openly, the cocktails served without whispers, and romance will have to reinvent itself. For now, though, you let yourself linger in the half-light, remembering the hidden world of sequins, smoke, and secrets, knowing it will never come again in quite the same way. The speakeasies fade into memory, but the echoes linger. You walk through streets that once pulsed with hidden doors, and though the curtains are gone, you can still feel the brush of velvet against your shoulder, smell the faint ghost of tobacco and Chanel No. 5 clinging to the air. The romance of that age doesn't vanish, it dissolves into history like sugar into gin, sweetening the past even as it disappears. Mainstream fact: when the 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition in 1933, America didn't suddenly forget the lessons of those hidden nights. Cocktail culture blossomed openly, jazz spilled into grand ballrooms, and women kept their bobbed hair and newfound independence. But the intimacy of speakeasy romances, the secrecy, the thrill, was never quite recaptured. You imagine the old regulars years later, sitting at legal bars, sipping drinks without needing a password. They must have chuckled, recalling the absurdity of code phrases like "Joe sent me" or vows exchanged with champagne corks. Some surely told their children about meeting a partner under smoky chandeliers. Others kept their memories locked away, private as the napkins they once scribbled love notes on. Quirky tidbit: decades after repeal, urban explorers claimed to find old matchbooks, empty bottles, even scrawled graffiti in sealed speakeasy basements. Words like "forever" or "meet me after the raid" etched faintly into plaster, as though love itself tried to leave breadcrumbs for future eyes. Maybe those traces were real. Maybe they were myths invented by storytellers who couldn't bear to let the age slip away. Historians still argue whether jazz-age romances deserve to be remembered as transformative or trivial. Were they sparks that challenged social barriers, or just fleeting indulgences dressed in sequins? The debate hums on like a record's faint crackle, but as you think back on the stolen kisses, the whispered codes, the vows under smoke, you know they mattered, even if only for the night. The curtains are gone, but the memories remain, stitched into the fabric of history. You carry them with you now, those lovers clinging in back rooms, scribbling on napkins, walking barefoot at dawn. Their world has ended, but its echoes are still humming in your ears. And now, as the last notes of jazz fade, let yourself drift slower. Picture the speakeasy dimming like a lantern being turned low. The smoke thins, the glasses stop clinking, and the laughter fades into a memory that warms but no longer stings. The city outside is quieter now. No raids, no rush, just the steady rhythm of footsteps on empty streets. You lean back, breathing easier, and imagine the velvet curtains brushing against your arm one final time, before they're pulled shut for good. The thrill has ebbed, but in its place is something softer, reassurance. That even in the most chaotic times, people still found ways to reach for each other. Love, however fleeting, always carves out space for itself. The images soften further. Pearls lose their shine, sequins blur into gentle glimmers, and the music that once rattled your chest becomes a hum you can barely hear, like a phonograph spinning at the edge of sleep. You picture the matchbooks, the napkins, the secret smiles, all floating away, carried off like smoke into the night sky. They don't vanish, they simply rest, waiting to be remembered again when you're ready. So breathe slower. Let your body sink heavier into the bed, as if you too are slipping behind those curtains, leaving the noise behind. Whatever stories the day has written on you, let them blur like chalk in the rain. You are safe now, wrapped in quiet, with nothing but the whisper of history rocking you toward sleep. And when you finally close your eyes, imagine the softest sound of all, the sigh of two lovers saying goodnight, somewhere in a hidden speakeasy that still exists, if only in dreams.